Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari. Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari. Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivaradhari. Jaya Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivaradhari. Yashodanandana Bhajana Randana. Yashodanandana Bhajana Ranjana. Yamuna Tira Vanachari. Yamuna Tira Vanachari. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari. Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari. Jai Om Vishnupad Paramahamsa Paravajakacharya Ashtotar Shri Srimad His Divine Grace Srila A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada Ki Jai. ISKCON BBT Founder Acharya Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. Jai Om Vishnupad Paramahamsa Paravajakacharya Ashtotar Shri Srimad Divine Grace Srila Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Thakur Ki Jai. Ananta Koti Vaishnavinda Ki Jai. Namacharya Srila Haridas Thakur Ki Jai. Srimad Bhagavad Gita Ki Jai. Samaveta Bhaktivinoda Ki Jai. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glory to Sri Guru and Gauranga. Okay. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. On the second day of October 2024 in San Diego, we're reading from Srimad Bhagavad Gita as it is, translation and commentary by His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada. Beginning a new chapter, chapter 13, entitled Nature, the Enjoyer, and Consciousness. And we'll be reading text 1 and 2 on page 529. Arjuna Vacha. Actually, we'll just do the first one, and I'll do the second one myself. Prakatim Purusham Chaiva Chaitram Chaitragyam Evacha Etad Veditum Ichchami Jnanam Gyayam Chakeshava. Arjuna Vacha Prakatim Purusham Chaiva Chaitram Chaitragyamevacha Etad Veditum Ichchami Jnanam Gyayam Chakeshava. Arjuna Vacha Prakatim Purusham Chaiva Chaitram Chaitragyamevacha Etad Veditum Ichchami Jnanam Gyayam Chakeshava. Arjuna Vacha Prakatim Purusham Chaiva Chaitram Chaitragyamevacha Etad Veditum Ichchami Jnanam Gyayam Chakeshava. Arjuna Vacha Prakatim Purusham Chaiva Chaitram Chaitragyamevacha Etad Veditum Ichchami Jnanam Gyayam Chakeshava. You want to try? Okay. Ladies? Arjuna Vacha Prakatim Purusham Chaiva Chaitram Chaitragyamevacha Etad Veditum Ichchami Jnanam Gyayam Chakeshava. Anyone else on this side? Not yet? Okay. Anyone online?
Arjuna Uvacha
Arjuna Vacha
Prakatim Purusham Chaiva
Prakatim Purusham Chaiva
Kshetram Kshetra Kamevacha
Chaitram Chaitragyamevacha
Etad Veditam Ichchami
Etad Veditum Ichchami
Jnanam Gyayam Chakeshava.
Jnanam Gyayam Chakeshava. Okay, word by words. Or I'll do the second verse and then I'll just. Shri Bhagavan Vacha idam shariram konteya chaitram ityavidiyate etad yo veditam prahu chaitragya ititam vidaha. Word by words. Arjuna Uvacha, Arjun said, Prakatim, nature, Purusham, the enjoyer, cha also, eva, certainly. Chaitram, the field, Chaitragyam, the knower of the field. Eva, certainly, cha also, etat, all this, veditum, to understand, ichchami, I wish. Jnanam, knowledge, gyayam, the object of knowledge, cha also, Keshava, O Krishna. All right, I'll just read the translation now. Arjun said, my dear Krishna, oh my dear Krishna, I wish to know about Prakriti, nature, Purusha, the enjoyer, and the field and the knower of the field, and of knowledge and the object of knowledge. The Supreme Personality of Godhead said, this body, O son of Kunti, is called the field, and one who knows this body is called the knower of the field. Purport. Arjuna was inquisitive about Prakriti, nature, Purusha, the enjoyer, Chaitra, the field, Chaitragya, its knower, and knowledge and the object of knowledge. When he inquired about all these, Krishna said that this body is called the field, and that one who knows this body is called the knower of the field. This body is the field of activity for the conditioned soul. The conditioned soul is entrapped in material existence, and he attempts to lord it over material nature. And so, according to his capacity to dominate material nature, he gets a field of activity. That field of activity is the body. And what is the body? The body is made of senses. The conditioned soul wants to enjoy sense gratification, and according to his capacity to enjoy sense gratification, he is offered a body or field of activity. Therefore, the body is called Kshetra, or the field of activity for the conditioned soul. Now, the person who should not identify himself with the body is called the Kshetragya, the knower of the field. It is not very difficult to understand the difference between the field and its knower, the body and the knower of the field. Any person can consider that from childhood to old age, he undergoes so many changes of body, and yet is still one person remaining. Thus, there is a difference between the knower of the field of activities and the actual field of activities. A living conditioned soul can thus understand that he is different from the body. It is described in the beginning, Dehi Nosmin, that the living entity is within the body, and that the body is changing from childhood to boyhood, and from boyhood to youth, and from youth to old age. And the person who owns the body knows that the body is changing. The owner is distinctly Kshetragya. Sometimes we think, I am happy, I am a man, I am a woman, I am a dog, I am a cat. These are the bodily designations of the knower. But the knower is different from the body. Although we may use many articles, our clothes, etc., we know that we are different from the things used. Similarly, we also understand by a little contemplation that we are different from the body. I or you or anyone else who owns the body is called the Kshetragya, the knower of the field of activities. And the body is called Kshetra, the field of activities. In the first 6 chapters of the Bhagavad Gita, the knower of the body, the living entity, and the position by which he can understand the Supreme Lord are described. In the middle 6 chapters of the Bhagavad Gita, the Supreme Personality of Godhead and the relationship between the individual soul and the Supersoul in regard to devotional service are described. The superior position of the Supreme Personality of Godhead and the subordinate position of the individual soul are definitely defined in these chapters. The living entities are subordinate under all circumstances, but in their forgetfulness they are suffering. When enlightened by pious activities, they approach the Supreme Lord in different capacities, as the distressed, those in want of money, the inquisitive, and those in search of knowledge. That is also described. Now, starting with the 13th chapter, how the living entity comes into contact with material nature, and how he is delivered by the Supreme Lord through the different methods of fruitive activities, cultivation of knowledge, and the discharge of devotional service, are explained. Although the living entity is completely different from the material body, he somehow becomes related. This is also explained. Om Jnana Timarandasya Jnanandana Shalakaya Chakshur Unmilitam Mena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. I was born in the darkest of ignorance, but my spiritual master Srila Prabhupada opened my eyes with the torchlight of knowledge. I offer my humble obeisance unto him and all members of Shri Parampara. Okay, that's it. I'm going to have to, I'm sorry about that. Hare Krishna. Okay, so we're embarking on this 13th chapter. Now, Prabhupada makes the point in one of the previous chapters within the last 6, that those 6 chapters in the middle, you got 6 chapters at the beginning, then you 6 in the middle, and 6 at the end, makes 18 chapters of Bhagavad Gita. That the essence of the Bhagavad Gita is in those 6 chapters, beginning with chapter 7. Not that the other chapters are not important, but if you contemplate those chapters, first of all, when we get to the 6th chapter, if you recall reading it, that is a chapter about Ashtanga Yoga, isn't it? Did I do Om Jnana? I did. Okay, I'm sorry. I'm getting, so there are different kinds of yoga described. You've got Karma Yoga, chapter 3, chapter 4. Jnana Yoga, I think 4 and 5, actually. And chapter 6 is Ashtanga Yoga. So Karma Yoga is the yoga of action, which basically has to do with sacrifice, sacrificing the fruits of your labor. So you're not bound up by attachments to all the things that you may gain. You're giving them, in our case, we give it for the service of the Lord. But we are bound up in this world by various material attachments from previous life, and we're cultivating more in this life. And they're called the knots in the heart. They're really a grunty. And they keep us coming back again and again and again. And especially if we're not in a society, in human society, where there's some sense of piety and self-control and all of these things, then you're sure to produce grossly sinful activities and lose the human form of life. It's a great tragedy, actually. So the Bhagavad Gita, Krishna explains in the 4th chapter, he comes in order to re-establish Dharma when it becomes confused and ineffective in society. Yadayada hedharmasa glani. This glani means mistakes and discrepancies. So he comes to re-establish Dharma and also to protect the devotees, paratanaya sadhunam, and also to annihilate the demons who are propagating all this adharma. So he has that in the 4th chapter that also describes the history of the Gita a little bit, how he spoke it millions of years ago to the sun god, and that he's speaking it again because the science as it is, by the powerful force of time, becomes distorted and corrupted. Just by the way time works in the material world. Everything is entropy increases. So then he goes on in the 5th chapter, there's many important instructions there on understanding Brahman, and especially the last verse, the peace formula. Bhoktaram yagyatabasam sarvaloka maheshwaram suridam sarvabhutanam gyatvanam shantim richati. This shanti comes up again and again, which is a prerequisite to happiness. Where is there any happiness without peace? But real peace means to understand that Krishna is the supreme enjoyer of all sacrifice and activities, that he is the master of all worlds, and that he is the best friend, our best friend dwelling in the heart, you see. So then we embark on chapter 6, which is all about this classical Ashtanga yoga as preached in the Yoga Sutras of Patanjali. Patanjali gives many more details, and Krishna gives a little summary. And it basically involves, what has become famous is sitting down in a lotus posture in a secluded place, practicing pranayama, and trying to control the mind, the senses, with the mind, meditating on the Lord in the heart, like that. So after describing the whole thing, and in several verses, I think 20 to 22, he describes once you realize God by this method, there'll be nothing further for you to know. You'll never be, overtaken by any misery. It's a very glowing description of the result of Ashtanga Yoga. But Prabhupada makes it very clear in the purport to that all of this is you get all of that and more by Bhakti Yoga. So anyway, Arjuna famously, he says, I can't do it. It's too hard. Chanchalam himana Krishna pramadi balabhadradham. That this mind is so restless and obstinate and powerful. It's like trying to control the wind. This hurricane we had, we got a plan how we're going to control it. There's no plan. There's no way. It's just too powerful, especially for one person. So he says, I can't do it. And if I try, I'll fail, and I'll be like a riven cloud. I give up my Kshatriya life, and I'll go, but I'll fail in that, and I already gave this up. I'll be like a riven cloud. So Krishna encouraged, don't worry. If you start it and fail, you'll take birth in a wealthy family and pious family, so you won't have to worry about that. Or even better, a yogi family like that. But basically, Arjuna is not very enthused about it. So then the last verse of that 6th chapter, which sets us up for the 7th chapter and the first of the middle 8, Krishna says, basically, he doesn't say don't worry, but the effect of the verse is, don't worry, Arjuna. Yoginam abhisarveshan madgaten antaratmana shuddhavam bhajate yomam sumayuktatabhamata. Of all the yogis, one who always meditates on me within the heart, with great and transcendental faith, and worships me with great faith, he is the best yogi of all. And that's Arjuna. He's always thinking of Krishna as his friend, so he's a big sigh of relief. But then the instruction continues. And in the next verse, which is the first verse of the 7th chapter, Krishna is described. Now I'm going to tell you how you can naturally and easily develop attachment to me in your mind, which is the whole point of Bhakti Yoga. We're meant to ultimately be so attached to yoga that we can't forget him. And that attachment to yoga, which matures into love, we express it through our service in this life, and then we go back to guide it. So then it's very important. Maya saktamana parta yogam yunjan manashya asangshayang samagam yata gyasati tat trinu. And that last word, Shrinu, means now hear. So he said, now I'm going to tell you how you can more easily have your mind attached to me. You can develop an attachment for me. And he begins with a very simple lesson, practical lesson. First of all, he describes the material elements. Now, this is also echoed now in this 13th chapter. Arjuna was, what is this Prakriti? So these elements, earth, water, fire, air, ether, mind, intelligence, ego, that's Prakriti. So there's a lot of overlap here. And he's basically explaining what he explained earlier in more detail. The modes of nature are going to come up in the next chapter, very important. But here, Arjuna has a list. I want to know about Prakriti, nature, Purusha, the enjoyer. Now, that refers to the soul, trying to enjoy. We're false Purushas. That's our problem. But our real nature is servants. And the field, and the knower of the field, and the knowledge and the object of knowledge. So all of these are subjects that we heard before, but they're going to be more nicely explained in detail now so we really can understand. And there's one verse that will come up later in the chapter that always stands out in my mind as an important takeaway from this chapter, where he says, Purushak prakatisto hi, bhunkte prakatijan gunan, karanam gunasangosya sadasad yoni janmasu. So the Purusha, now we are the Purusha in our conditioned state. We're actually Prakriti, but we're acting like Purusha as the enjoyer and controller. So we're referred to the conditioned soul of the Purusha. Situated in Prakriti, in nature. Bhunkte Prakriti Jan Gunan. Now the word bhunkte often means enjoy, but it can also just mean experience, meaning positive and negative things that you get. Bhunkte Prakriti Jan Gunan. We experience in our relationship with Prakriti, with material nature, both happiness and distress. And what determines which is what we experience? Karanang gurasangosya. It is caused by how we associate with the modes of nature. If we allow ourselves to be affected by the modes of ignorance and passion, then we may enjoy some fleeting pleasure, but we're going to have a lot of pain, and we'll probably lose the human form of life. So, but knowing that we can choose to associate with the mode of goodness, choose to associate with those in the mode of goodness, so that we can uplift ourselves. And in the mode of goodness, that is a good foundation for cultivating pure goodness, which is the platform for bhakti. So this verse, Purusha bhunkte prakati jan karanam gunasangosya sadasad yoni janmasu. By our own will, we associate with people and things in different modes of nature, and that determines our destiny. Sadasad yoni means good or bad birth. We are determining it now. We have that freedom, and with the knowledge of what to associate with and what not to associate with, we can get a better next birth. Hopefully, not even on this material plane. But that's what we're shooting for, you see? So there's so much important instruction in this chapter. And now Krishna, even in this first verse, he begins answering the question. This body is the field, and one who knows this body is called the knower of the field. Now this was explained as Prabhupada refers back in chapter 2. Dehina. The very word dehina, which is the first word of the first verse that many devotees who are into memorizing verses memorize, which is the process of transmigration. And it's a wonderful verse, because when you study it, it's just like a light bulb goes on. Yeah, I can understand that. Dehinosmin yata dehi. Just as you can easily remember what dehina means when they have the word in. Deha is body. Dehina is that what's in the body. What's in the body is the soul. Dehinosmin yata dehe komaram yovananjana. That within this body, the soul the body's changing. So you're experiencing yourself going through these different ages. Koma means a young boy, but it could be a young girl too. Komari, So young girl, young boy, we can all remember when we were 8, 7, 6, like that. And then we got older, and we gradually be adolescents, and we become into adulthood and like that. So you can remember, you can't remember it all, but you can remember those stages. So then you can intuit, and Krishna says, but then the soul gets another body after death. So this is a key verse, because if we understand this verse and we believe in it, then it should change our perspective of what's important in life. Knowing that we have a long history, that we've come to human life, and that in this human life, depending on how we act, what we see, hear, and talk, and do, and everything, that will determine our next life. So if we're intelligent, we'll learn how to act in such a way that we'll get the best next life. Best next life is to give up this human life, this material body entirely and never get another one. That's going back to Godhead. But even if we can't complete the course in this life, we should be determined to make as much advancement as possible so that we can continue in our next life. The whole point of the second chapter in a good part of the Gita is to get us free from this idea that this is our only life. This is a short one chapter in a very long book, this particular life that we have. But because we've come in contact with Krishna consciousness, it's auspicious. Our life is automatically auspicious. And depending on what we do from here on out, it will be even much more auspicious. And if we apply the knowledge that we're learning here in the Bhagavad Gita. Okay, so that's our little introduction. And any questions on this? Krishna will now systematically answer these questions: what Prakriti is, what Purusha is, and all of these different things. Okay, let's go. Oh, you have the right page? 531. 531. Okay. Kshetragyam chapi mam vidhi Sarva Kshetreshu Bharata Kshetraghyor Jnanam Yatta Jnanam Matang Mama. Oh, scion of Bharat. Now you have to learn this word. I didn't know what it meant. When scion means a descendant. You're a descendant of Bharat. Sometimes they call him a son of Bharat. It means the same thing. Oh, scion of Bharat, you should understand that I am also the knower in all bodies. And to understand this body and its knower is called knowledge. That is my opinion. That knower really means knowers. In other words, it's two. Krishna is in our heart as the Supersoul, and we're also there. But the vast number of people don't know that. But God is always watching us. He's looking and he's taking notes, figuratively speaking. But for our next birth, planning out our next birth. So that is my opinion. Purport: while discussing the subject of the body and the knower of the body, the soul and the supersoul, we shall find three different types of topics of study: the Lord, the living entity, and matter. In every field of activities, in every body, there are two souls, the individual soul and the supersoul. Because the Supersoul is the plenary expansion of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Now, plenary, Prabhupada uses this word a lot. Plenary means that he's a full expansion, but he doesn't display all of the qualities of Krishna, the original. He has a certain function, the Supersoul. He witnesses, he describes. Krishna describes Sarvasya Chaham Vriddhisannivish. This will be in the next chapter, 15:15. Sarvasya Chaham Vriddhisannivishto Mattak Smatir Jnanam Apohanangsha. That's the first idea. I am situated in everyone's heart, not just human body, every single body, organism. In the area of the heart, and from me come remembrance, knowledge, and forgetfulness also. And we can now see how important that forgetfulness is. Because you can imagine if we could remember all the details of a last life and lives, how we went through this or that. Oh no, now I remember how I got killed. Oh my God. We'd have a massive case of PTSD. We couldn't function, So that forgetfulness is a blessing. But the idea, forgetfulness, but that means it happened. So many births happen, It changes your whole perspective of what your life is. The main thing is, you're not going to die. Nobody dies. I made up this little poem. I don't know if you heard this one. It's best if you read it. Every body dies. Every single body dies. Every body dies, nobody dies. Wake up, and open your eyes. You're not that body, you're a pure spirit soul. Chant the holy name and attain life's goal. It's all there, if you can just remember that one. So, Kshetragyam. So the knower of the field, as we can experience, we know some of what's going on in our body, not all the things, but certainly better than anyone else. So that's we're knower of the field. And the field, this is the field of activity. If we're seeing something, but it's impacting our eyes, the eyeballs, right? In other words, the whole thing is actually happening in here, but by Krishna's arrangement, we feel that we can reach out. But the real field of the activity is the body itself. And then, very importantly, this another knower, I am also there. Chetudam chapimam vidya. Cha means also. And one who knows this about the field and the knowers of the field, that's real knowledge. That's the beginning of knowledge, you see. Okay. Well, discussing the subject of the body and the knower of the body, the soul and the supersoul, we shall find 3 different topics. Did we read that already? You did. All right, let's go on to the next paragraph. One who studies the subject matter of the field of activity and the knower of the field very minutely in terms of this Bhagavad Gita can attain to knowledge. The Lord says, I am the knower of the field of activities in every individual body. Close quote. The individual may be the knower of his own body, but he is not a knowledge of other bodies. The Supreme Personality of Godhead, who is present as the Supersoul in all bodies, knows everything about all bodies. He knows all the different bodies of all the various species of life. A citizen may know everything about his patch of land, but the king knows not only his palace, but all the properties possessed by the individual citizens. Similarly, one may be the proprietor of the body individually, but the Supreme Lord is the proprietor of all bodies. The king is the original proprietor of the kingdom, and the citizen is the secondary proprietor. Similarly, the Supreme Lord is the supreme proprietor of all bodies. The body consists of the senses. The Supreme Lord is Rishikesha, which means, boy, that's a mistake. I'll fix that one on the reprint. You have a capital W there? You have a capital W on which? Yes. Yeah, that's... you don't have it. Oh, there's a different edition. Let's see, this is the latest one. That's 2021. I think we printed after that. I think we caught it. Anyway, we'll fix it. The Supreme Lord is Rishikesh, which means the controller of the senses. He is the original controller of the senses, just as the king is the original controller of all the activities of the state. The citizens are secondary controllers. The Lord says, I am also the knower. This means that he is the super knower. The individual soul knows only his particular body. In the Mahabharata, Shanti Parva 339.6, it is stated as follows: Chetrani hi sharirani bijam chapi shubhashubhe tani veti sayogatma tatak chetra gauchite. This body is called the Chetra, and within it dwells the owner of the body and the Supreme Lord, who knows both the body and the owner of the body. Therefore, he is called the knower of all fields. The distinction between the field of activities, the knower of activities, and the supreme knower of activities is described as follows. Perfect knowledge of the constitution of the body, the constitution of the individual soul, and the constitution of the supersoul is known in terms of Vedic literature as jnana. That is the opinion of Krishna. To understand both the soul and the supersoul as one yet distinct is knowledge. One who does not understand the field of activity and the knower of activity is not in perfect knowledge. One has to understand the position of Prakriti, nature, Purusha, the enjoyer of nature, and Ishvara, the knower who dominates or controls nature and the individual soul. One should not confuse the three in their different capacities. One should not confuse the painter, the painting, and the easel. The material world, which is the field of activities, is nature, and the enjoyer of nature is the living entity. And above them both is the Supreme Controller, the Personality of Godhead. It is stated in the Vedic language in the Shvetashvatara Upanishad 112, Bhokta Bhogyam Preritaram Cha Matval Sarvam Proktam Chivadham Brahmam Etat. There are three Brahman conceptions. Prakriti is Brahman as the field of activities, and the Jiva, individual soul, is also Brahman and is trying to control material nature. And the controller of both of them is also Brahman, but he is the factual controller. In this chapter, it will also be explained that out of the two knowers, one is fallible and the other is infallible. One is, now, just one note on Prabhupada's vocabulary. He used this word fallible to mean in the way that he pronounced it, fallible and infallible. meaning that we have the tendency to fall into the material world, and Krishna doesn't. That's why he's called achyuta. Achyuta means to fall, or something that falls. He's achyuta, not fallable, you see. So just remember that. Of course, Krishna is also infallible. He never makes a mistake, but that's not what Prabhupada means when he uses the word. One is superior and the other is subordinate. One who understands the two knowers of the field to be one and the same contradicts the Supreme Personality of Godhead, who states here very clearly, I am also the knower of the field of activity. One who misunderstands a rope to be a serpent is not in knowledge. There are different kinds of bodies, and there are different owners of the bodies, because each individual soul has its individual capacity for lording it over material nature. There are different bodies. But the Supreme also is present in them as the controller. The word cha is significant, for it indicates the total number of bodies. That is the opinion of Srila Baladev Vidyabhushan. Krishna is the Supersoul present in each and every body apart from the individual soul. And Krishna explicitly says here that real knowledge is to know that the Supersoul is the controller of both the field of activities and the finite enjoyer. Now, how does this pertain to our practice of devotional service, this kind of knowledge? Well, if we take kind of a model of Arjuna's situation in the first and second chapter, and then how he surrendered. I think I was mentioning this yesterday. You were here. So Arjuna, he took the role. He was put into the role of a conditioned soul temporarily, so that the Gita could be spoken. You know, he's always with Krishna when he takes birth. Arjuna takes birth, you know, with him. But he fell into this position of what we would call the bodily conception of life. He was displaying the kind of attitude that a very pious person would. In other words, he was being good in that he didn't want to fight with his beloved teacher and his beloved grandfather figure in Bhishma Dev, and all other relatives and friends on both sides. He saw this battle. He had been in so many wars and won so many battles, but this one was different because it was internecine. It was between two parts of the same clan, practically, you know. So he adopted this sense of the material or bodily relationships that he had. He saw as impediments to him fighting. He said, "What's the point? Even if I win the kingdom, it'll be soaked with the blood of the people I love. Well, what's that? You know, I'd be happier if I just went off the battlefield and went begging somewhere." That was his proposal. But he wasn't suited for that. And Krishna explained to him, if you do that, everyone will think you left out of cowardice, not that high-minded thing. Your good name will be drawn in the dirt, you know. And then there's this famous line in the old Gita, which I preferred, is that for one who's been honored, dishonor is worse than death, you know. So Krishna was, you know, encouraging him to fight. But Arjuna was not ready to fight because he was too much absorbed in this bodily concept of life. That's the whole idea. So understanding this chapter and this idea that he is the knower of the field, his body, and his body is related to other bodies, but all of that is temporary and relative and fleeting. What's most important is not your relationship with the body, but your relationship with Krishna, with the Supersoul, with the eternity. In other words, we have to learn, and Arjuna is a model for, you know, ultimately where he surrenders. So we're trying, you know, Prabhupada says we should receive the Gita like Arjuna did. That to see ourselves as spiritual beings and think in terms of this long and wide perspective of our previous lives and how we must have done something very, very good in connection to be able to even come in contact with Krishna consciousness and have some faith so that we're receptive to the message. That's all important. And so how can we best use the time that's left in our lives? That's really the question. We have, rather than just go with the flow, you know, where our senses take us, our mind take us, so this is interesting, that's interesting, I don't want to do that today, let me sleep in, whatever, you know. In other words, the ordinary, you know, deciding what to do based more or less on your where your mind and body are at, you know, a specific time in your life. But no, we want to get a spiritual perspective. What's best for my eternal life? That's really what counts, because whatever I do, you know, other than that is fleeting, and it will tend to bind me to this life. So understanding that and having faith in the knowledge and that is possible to do, because by the mercy of Lord Chaitanya, the process has been made feasible for us, the chanting and all of these things. Then when we read these chapters, we'll understand all of this pertains to how we should think of ourselves in this world and how we should deal with our senses and the object of the senses and environment and everything we do, so that it helps further our passage on the Bhakti Marga, the path toward the perfection of life, love for Krishna, returning back home, back to Godhead. And that's the whole reason why Prabhupada started this institution, to make it available, that these classes, the books, the deities, the prasadam, the association, the chanting, all of this, with great effort he established, And you read the story of how it happened. It's obviously Krishna's hand is in there, guiding him, protecting him. It's quite a saga, but we're part of it. Even if I was fortunate enough to be there, personally, see with Prabhupada. I got the high point of my life was getting initiated personally by Prabhupada in Brahman initiation in Vrindavan. Yeah, in 1975. Yeah. Yeah, believe me, I didn't do anything special to do that, but it happened. So that was a very fortunate thing. But the point is all right, now you take the ball and run with it. In other words, that's not the end of it. That's just a very auspicious thing. Now I should, continue with devotional service and try to share it as much as possible. So that's what's going on here. And Arjun is answering, Krishna is answering Arjun's questions systematically. If you have any questions while I'm reading, then you can raise your hand. Okay, here we have one of the mics. Now I kind of lost my place. Am I in the second paragraph here? Or the third? I'm sorry? Oh, we finished it. Okay, go ahead, Prabhu.
So the purport talks about how Krishna is the controller of the field.
Yeah.
Do you think, in your opinion, does that explain why people die at different times? Because sometimes people will be as healthy as they possibly can and they die early, and then other times people will do everything sort of wrong and they'll live to be 100. And it's sort of inexplicable. Does this kind of speak to that?
That's a broader understanding, is that we have for most people that assume like they don't know anything about Krishna consciousness. You're talking about the things that are amazing out there, not necessarily how it doesn't. Why did this person seemed to be doing very well, but suddenly they developed this and they passed on, and this other person had this chronic disease, but they lived to 90, whatever. In other words, you can't really tell. The point is that the all-pervasiveness of the Supersoul and the omniscience of the Supersoul. For me, there's three basic qualities of God that you get from Western theology, right? Omnipotent, omniscient, and omnipresent. I learned that before I even heard of Krishna consciousness, in school. So the most amazing one of those to me is the omniscient. To know everything. And Krishna says this specifically in the 7th chapter, Vedaham samachitadi, I know everything. Just think about what everything means. Everything that happened in the past, everything that's happening now, and everything that will happen in the future. That's a mind blower, that any entity could know all that. But what's really important, and this comes up in that verse I mentioned at the end of the 5th chapter, which Prabhupada called the peace formula. Bhoktaram yagitapasang sarvaloka maheshwaram suridam sarvabhutadam gyatva shantim richati. If you wonder, Krishna speaks about himself, I am the ultimate enjoyer of all sacrifices. Bhoktaram yagita, sacrifices and austerities. Sarvaloka maheshwaram, I am the supreme Lord of all planets. But then, the one that really counts for us, I am the well-wishing friend of everyone in the heart. Suridam sarvabhutanam gyatva mam shantam richati. And one who knows this can attain real peace. Now, the part about being the ultimate enjoyer of all sacrifices, okay, that's a prescription for us, that our work, whatever we do, the perfection of it is if the motive is to please Krishna and it's being done for that, and it actually fulfills that role because you're doing something, you're chanting or whatever it is. You're doing bhakti. That's pleasing to Krishna. We're just remembering him. So, and then he's the Lord of all worlds. Okay, that's very. But the fact that he's the best, our well-wishing friend. If he weren't our well-wishing friend, yet he knows everything about us, then we're worried about the CIA and the FBI, right? What do you need? What do you mean? Don't you need a warrant? But he automatically knows everything. But he's our best well-wishing friend. So that means that his guidance. Now we're getting the guidance anyway, from within, but from me come knowledge, remembrance, and all these different things. But if we actually find out what he wants, not that he's just going to guide us so that we can fulfill our desires, except where the karma comes in. That's the official position. But Krishna has his own desires, meaning that he wants us to come back to him. We're his children. We're wayward children from billions and millions of births. We're groveling around as dogs and hogs and insects. You can imagine how a father would feel, So, but now the human life. So he comes and he speaks the Bhagavad Gita, and within our heart, he's always trying to give us good instruction. And when we're also getting from outside, now we can't hear him, so he comes from outside in the form of the spiritual master and the form of the books. Or he actually appears as his son personally, and speaks the Bhagavad Gita. So in so many ways, our eternal Father and friend is trying to help us. Now all we need to do is to turn toward him, and then our whole destiny changes. Whatever was predicted for us, say by some astrologer when we didn't know anything about Krishna, we're just following our karma, that all gets scrambled. Your karma is, okay, that's eradicated. And the power of the holy name to do that, I mean, there's so many verses that once chanting once, maybe it stands once purely, all your karma is gone, But there's one verse in the Bhagavatam, in the 6th canto, where you just hear the holy name once, and all your karma is. What an inducement for us to go out on Harinam, and chant the holy name, and people passing by, animals, whatever it is. So the point is that this philosophy, if you believe it, it changes your whole perspective. It should change your whole perspective of what's important in life, what I should strive for, what I shouldn't do, what I should try to get out, finish my life. And so because whatever we do, this is going to help determine our destiny. It's not just YOLO. Forget the YOLO. You only live once. I don't know. They used to have a shirt like that. What?
Pretty hip of you.
Well, that was like years ago, right? Is it still? I think it's still. But we're not YOLO. It's not YOLO. That's stupid. Because the implication of that is that therefore have as much fun as you can, as quick as you can, and then suffer like crazy. No, it's not you only live once. You never die. So therefore, don't do anything stupid. Don't do anything to bury your life, but rather do whatever you can to improve your destiny. So, I'm sorry. I'm sure I didn't answer your question.
No, you didn't.
Did I did?
Yeah.
Okay. Well, why don't we go on then? Well, we have one more. Maybe we finished the purport. All right. So let's see. These are pretty. Oh, this is a short purport. It's the text 4. Tat chetram yatche yadrikcha. Yad vikari yatascha yat. Sachayo yat prabhavascha. Tat samasena me shunu. Now, please hear my brief description of this field of activity and how it is constituted, what its changes are, whence it is produced, who that knower of the field of activities is, and what his influences are. Purport. The Lord is describing the field of activities and the knower of the field of activities in their constitutional position. One has to know how the body is constituted, the materials of which this body is made, under whose control this body is working, how the changes are taking place, where from the changes are coming, what the causes are, what the reasons are, what the ultimate goal of the individual soul is, and what the actual form of the individual soul is. One should also know the distinction between the individual living soul and the supersoul, their different influences, their potentials, etc. One just has to understand this Bhagavad Gita directly from the description given by the Supreme Personality of Godhead, and all this will be clarified. But one should be careful not to consider the Supreme Personality of Godhead in every body to be one with the individual soul, the jiva. This is something like equating the potent and the impotent. So, so this is, we'll pursue this next week. But this knowledge, there's just like it said that vairagya, detachment, is also strengthened by knowledge. Like, it's very simple. I remember when the cigarette packs first got that little notice. I'm that old, early 60s, I think it was, And I was already a smoker. I was a smoker for some years, from 15 to like 21, something like that. And I already knew that wasn't good. It wasn't so good for me to be smoking, but this is like, but why did they put that on there? Well, it was a big battle with the cigarette companies. They didn't want that on there because that would hurt sales, right? But no, there was a big upsurge, because it was obvious that smoking was bad and kids were smoking, taking cigarettes, like that. So finally that came on there. And it's the principle of vairagya. Well, if they'll read that, they said, well, why should I do this? If it's harmful for my smoke, I won't take it up. That's the end. So knowledge helps strengthen vairagya, detachment. And that's why so many reading about this and understanding the details, how the Prakriti works and how we fit in and so forth, is important, because it'll help us to strengthen our intelligence for what in our practice of devotional service. Because there are the periods when I'm just not into it now. I think maybe I'll chant my rounds tomorrow or something. But then you realize, well, wait a minute. I mean, my own. I know that my mind can be my worst enemy, and if I start listening to my mind, postponing or saying it's not so important, or saying I got something more important to do, then that mind will be strengthened in that direction. And before long, my sadhana will be very iffy, it'll be ragged. The whole idea is to get very regulated, and it's almost like, like anything, if you want to become a good athlete, you have to really put in the work and develop a skill, whatever it may be, and be dedicated, and not just say, well, that's it. Today I'm kicking back, I'm just going to, too much, Well, then you probably won't reach your goal. So it's even more so with this, because it goes against the grain of like everything that's going on around us. The vast majority of people are not at all into this. They're being conducted by their particular whims and habits and whatever they're in. But we want to take a different course. We want to try to make some progress on our pathway back to the ultimate goal of life. And the wonderful thing is, if you do it right, then along the way, it's a very joyous thing to do. There's so much benefit to Krishna consciousness, aside from going back to Godhead, just living in this world with the understanding and having, developing the tolerance. If you can chant nicely, you can tolerate so many things. The weather, and different things. Even if you get sick, you have, and that's a tremendous asset in this modern world, because so many people, it's so difficult. There's a real epidemic of mental illness, depression and things like that. Well, why, you become depressed if you're chanting your rounds regularly and you're in touch with Krishna, and it's having benefits you don't even realize, but it's making you upbeat. Why should I be upbeat at this point? I'm getting old. Senses are. I don't know, but I am. Because, all right, at any time you can chant Hare Krishna and you can feel the benefits. And the same thing goes with all these nectar shlokas that I put into poems. So I'm going to give you a nice little poem. I'm trying to remember one that I haven't get. Okay, this is it'll take a minute. It'll be all right. The fallen redemption of the soul. There's not a Sanskrit. There's no Sanskrit to it. It's just like, where Krishna lives, felicity abounds. With pure simplicity and loving sensibility, all serve him with humility. But when a living entity rejects his true identity and out of sheer stupidity surrenders to cupidity, he loses all sagacity and with it all capacity to understand reality or curb his sensuality. Abandoning humility, he touts his own ability, forgetting his fragility and fortune's volatility. Immersed in asininity for what seems an infinity of lives devoid of piety, he suffers in anxiety till contact with God's devotee, perhaps of utmost brevity, awakens his affinity for words of the divinity. Perceiving the futility of all his imbecility, the soul regains his sanity and casts away his vanity. Endowed with new humility, he serves with all ability and growing spontaneity his guru and the deity. Regaining his identity, the wayward living entity returns to the fraternity of Krishna for eternity. Gaur Premanandi Hari Hari Bol. That was a long one, you say? Oh, no. Well, that one long ago. That's part of me. All right, we'll resume on Monday. You're all invited. All glories to Srila Prabhupada. And thank you for the online group. I know you're out there. Hari Bol. I have a slideshow that goes with that too. Sunday feast. I'm supposed to